All right, today I want to show you 10 things that literally anyone can do right now to instantly improve their tone on the mandolin. If you're new here, my name is David, and I've been spending the past 20 odd years or so trying to find that perfect mandolin tone. And over the years, I've picked up these tone hacks that work super well for anyone regardless of their skill level or even how nice your mandolin is. And we'll start off with this thing here. Changing your pick is the cheapest and fastest way to change the sound of your mandolin. And if you don't believe me, let me show you this. Pretty drastic difference, right? You know, I feel like our lifelong journey as a mandolin player is to try to make this really bright instrument sound just a little bit darker than it really is. And an easy way to do that is to use a thicker pick. Something that doesn't flex against the strings so that you can push through and get a little bit more of the wood resonating rather than just the plastic of the pick and the metal of the strings. A lot of players in bluegrass and other mandolin-centric styles tend to use something between maybe 1 to 1.6 millimeters in thickness. A lot of people tend to use these big triangle shapes, but others tend to use more rounded points for an even darker tone. But there's so many variables, so many different options these days, so try a bunch and see what works best for you and your mandolin. And if you're interested in what I use, I have these new signature picks from Tone Slabs, and there's a link below if you want to check them out. Tip number 2 is also really easy. It's just change your strings. I don't know if you're like me, but I kind of hate changing my mandolin strings, and often I let a couple months go by before I put a fresh set on. But when I do, I'm always amazed at how much better the mandolin sounds and feels. It might take a couple days for those strings to really settle in, but once they do, it always sounds fuller and louder and with better sustain, just an easy way to improve your tone overall. And it doesn't even matter what strings that you use. If you're interested in what I use, again, I like these D'Addario Custom Medium XS coated strings, but not sponsored, and there's tons of other great options out there too. And those fresh strings are also gonna stay in tune a lot better, which takes us to tip number 3. Keep your mandolin in tune, because if your mandolin is not in tune, it doesn't matter what tone you have, it's gonna sound pretty awful, right? Often we settle for less with tuning on the mandolin, but even just a slight miscalculation can really make this instrument sound kind of bad. Try to learn to tune the mandolin by ear. That way you can really hear when it's out of tune and how to fix it without any reference. But in occasions where you do have to use a tuner, like a loud jam or on stage, it's important just to tune one string to the tuner and then tune the other string to the string that's in tune. But let's get on to the more technical stuff here with tip number 4, which is choosing your pick grip. I think the pick grip is really the kingmaker of the tone on the mandolin. But the confusing thing is, if you look at all these professional players out there today, they have many different approaches to this one topic. But if you're just starting out, here's kind of a blank slate pick grip technique that I might recommend. And it's pretty easy. All you have to do is take your right hand and make a relaxed fist in front of you like this. Lift up your thumb. Place your pick facing out on the last segment of your index, then lay your thumb over top, and voila, that's your pick grip. And there's an important balance between holding it relaxed, but also having some firmness so that you can really push that thicker pick through the strings and get a good tone without sounding too brittle, clenching down on the pick too much. So as you're discovering your own pick grip, I think it's really important to look at some of your mandolin heroes and try to emulate their right hand as close as possible, just so you can learn from them and try different things out to see what works best for you. The next is very similar here with choosing your pick angle, which is another big part of how the sound comes out of your instrument. Take a listen to this. So most of us mandolin players are trying to avoid playing with the pick parallel to the strings. Definitely sounds a lot brighter and plasticky that way. Whereas if we angle the pick with the knife edge of the pick going into the strings, it's a little darker and softer, which is great for tone. And an easy hack here is, instead of having to really angle your wrist in to get that angle you want, you can just tip the neck of the mandolin up to angle the strings so that it meets the pick at the right degree. You can also get some crazy tone variances just depending on where you place your pick in this spectrum. So if you want a brighter, kind of more brassy sound, you can play closer down to the bridge here. But if you want more of a mellow, darker sound, you can play over the fretboard. There's no right answer here. There might be opportunities where it would be good to do one or the other, but for the most part, I find myself somewhere in the middle where my pick is kind of falling right down there at the end of the extension. I feel like I can push through the strings there a little bit easier than down at the bridge, and I still don't have to worry about the pick hitting the frets and clicking, which also isn't nice. Another big tone hang-up I see in players is just not following through both of the strings in the set. You want to make sure that you're playing the set as one string and following through to get a really full sound from both strings. A great way to practice this is with what we call rest strokes, where you play really slow and allow the pick to rest against each adjacent string as you play the note. So here on my A string, I'm resting on the E string as I go down and resting on the D string as I go up. Obviously, we don't have time to rest on every adjacent string when we're playing faster, but even so, practicing these rest strokes can help you get in that mindset of following through every single note. Also related to that tip is playing with the right volume. And this is also arbitrary. Different players play at different loudness, but there is kind of a Goldilocks effect where you don't want to play too quiet or too loud to make your instrument sound the best that it possibly can. Some of us might play a little bit too quiet where we don't let the notes really speak or ring out the way that they should, and others of us play too loud where we're overpowering the instrument and driving things too hard. So finding that Goldilocks effect where every note can ring out with strength, but not too much. So far, we've just been talking about the right hand, but the left hand also has responsibility in the tone department. And I think the first thing is to think about how your hands coordinate together. Oftentimes, we just assume that both hands are gonna do what we want them to at the same time, no questions asked, when that isn't always the case. Oftentimes, I find my left hand getting to the note too late, which means there's muting or buzzing, which definitely does not add to good tone. And one thing that I found helpful is, instead of hoping that both hands line up at the same time, is establishing kind of a hierarchy between your two hands. I like to think about my left hand as being the leader to my right hand, which might seem kind of backwards since the right hand is the one that's articulating the note with the pick. But if you make your left hand the leader and make that trigger of your left hand hitting the strings at the right fret at the right time for your right hand to follow through with the pick, there should be no possible chance for there to be a gap between the hands lining up at the right time. Crazy. It was kind of a light bulb moment for me. Try it out, see if it works for you. And another big left-hand tip here is just to let every single note ring out for as long as possible, no matter how fast you're playing. You know, if you're getting all these gaps between the notes, it takes away from your volume and definitely takes away from your tone. And I've heard Katarina Lichtenberg, the amazing classical mandolinist, say it so beautifully, how on the mandolin, we want our notes to be like pearls on a necklace. You want to see those pearls individually, but you don't want there to be any gaps between them. So think about that as you're playing. Just let every note run into the next one. But of course, none of these tips are going to do you much good unless your mandolin is in good working order. So our last tip for today is to make sure that you have a good setup on your mandolin. And if you've never set up a mandolin before, then check out this video right here on screen for my 5-step process. And don't forget to subscribe and like down below. Please leave a comment if you have any other tone tips that you'd like to share too, and I'll see you soon.